QRM Private Live 5521 0021 21. Rio de Janeiro City, Rio de Janeiro State, Federative Unity Brazil. We have a conversation quite clear, quite simple today, 24 April 2022. First of all, we must assume and recognize that the transnational organized crime has, a huge strength, I would say, and in general acts by the weakness on internal areas. This model represents this very well. In all corporative area around the globe, which must act in other areas, we have governments that must sometimes do the regulatory arguments in local areas under the responsibility and domain of those governments. But the corruption, considering the interest in obtain advantage, sometimes you will have government in those areas with action all around the globe acting by circles inside the square, and the combination as local government with a corporate area acting in an international area by illicit things sets the transnational organized crime as itself, and in a very specific moment will impact the state as architecture, an institution, and even your defense. And in this way, we'll observe that we'll open a new pathway or trail for this argument as transnational organized crime, which is the corrupted integration between state departments as defensive. And this is a paramilitary organization. It's forbidden by the Brazilian Constitution, but it's ongoing. Will act since state, which implies a conjuncture, and by inference it's a parallel conjuncture, with argument as government affecting and impacting the democratic institution and balance of power, and corporative area in the same way, because the integration of two both as government with local regulatory premise and a corporative area which can be national or international, indeed acting by fail and concurrent interest in obtain any kind of gain, indeed your conjuncture or state is kind of something that we observed when we had the presentation between the organization as triads in China, that indeed we have the corporative area, the government, and the state as a single thing. Then they have no difference. And in Japan is different because they have a hierarchical distribution of power, considering two patterns of organization and business as Zaibatsu and Keiretsu. This kind of distortion we will get on the international financial system with operation by an interface named bank, and as clandestine corporate activity, governmental activity, indeed doing the regulatory premises as mandatory need, do the decreasement as capacity of your local regulation to create privilege for international business or things like this, as observed on FIFA, Olympics and COVID-19, will impact your finances by the clandestine level as activity and the conjuncture evaluation by the parallel and paramilitary mobilization, even as state architecture, and will get the relation impacted as debit and credit to cover this kind of things if you go as overpayment object investigated at the operation Third Wind FBI. Indeed, the relation between debts and credits with overpayment, but things in a not orthodox way. Your debt and your credit are not equal. You are kind of having illusion and simulation to keep this. This go by blind association inside institution and reports a financial statement about the records on micro corporate economy or account. The same way the supply and demand having a level here as logistic, and we have a lot of frauds as logistic system, and the intersection by two both goes by supply chain. In the same way, we have problems on it. And the supply chain indeed will present the relation as everything that you had as your production, items produced or service offered, and the money available to cover this. The value of your conjuncture is equal as the value or evaluation as perception of things offered or presented at this conjuncture. But with failures, since the relation between debit and credit with the illusion and going by the association and not balance perception between supply and demand, of course that you probably do not have things enough produced or offered as service to present your storage of money. And then we must ask, which is the source of your money storage? And if you are a closed conjuncture, considering the kind of organization that take advantage, indeed took, of this kind of failure, you will not be able to present statement as transparency. And if all your peers are following you, you are the top level as this Ponzi scheme. The continuity of your interest as obtained advantage by failures in governmental area and corporate area, especially area doing international business, oriented to have the consolidation as pandemic crime, will impact the West at democracy. And considering types of interest, for instance, on USA, that have the Democratic and the Republicans, the concurrent association of two both indeed will not represent the interest as Republican or Democratic, that is the general distribution or division of power in USA. Indeed, we are not present in the America, despite going inside the heart of America. Complicated. We could have in the same way that the pattern as distribution, considering the organized crime, is acting as a matrix with lines and columns, and the permutative value in the middle by the interface, interconnecting different areas, and sometimes corrupting both by the kind of advantage you offer and the type of people you place it as hiring process on your company or designation in your governmental chair. We can get this after you had the mobilization of things did until this time by the quadrant tracer, considering the buildings presenting the distortion, the flow and reversal flow as operation, since debit and credit, supply and demand, investment saving curve and liquidity money curve will not match. It means that you have problems and failures and noise inside covered by the concurrent interest in to keep this as lenient control and blind association. And in the same way, we could observe that the design and pattern observing during the COVID-19 indeed give me the idea as a notation with association which must be inside, the virus must be inside an organism. In the same way, the corruption must be inside an institution. And this organism, as that goes inside, will be a bacteria or a virus in the very first moment. And we use it, the perception, as the corporative area and the public area. And suddenly we had a new player at the match considering something that will take advantage of to both, which indeed it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, and it's something that goes and sometimes by their own way, name it parasite. The parasite indeed be at the will be hosted at your institution or organism after have the entrance, but the entrance goes by specific hands, and the pandemic events with specific hands indeed have the window open by transference named stimulus. These stimulus as a regression point to tax. Keeping our regression, which is the income made by your contributors or citizen. It means your treasury. And your treasury as a storage of tax payment doing had the use as transference by stimulus, we must ask which is the stimulation. And this question is obvious oriented to the chair as a specific chair that did this. After you get the point about which is the stimulation, we will ask which is the relation of this stimulation and the failures on corporative area and public area. Because we are having, even on OECD, the new speech about the taxation in global scale. But there are no tax system as payment system effective by the use that goes by specific hands. Kind of they are all created to be functional, but they do not have the functionality by the misusage of things. Very similar to the patria observed in a very first moment as the regulatory premise by the government that creates in the same way the taxation rules, and by the concurrent interest with companies. Can we have here a new trace or trail to be at the antitrust justice America, considering the federal justice and the federal bureau of investigation, especially concerned with overpriced contracts, white-collar crime, public corruption, weapons of mass destruction, crimes against mankind, violation of civil rights, and paramilitary activity. All these presented and offered to the inside the Security Forum as a report, in the end reporting to the NATO, and the NATO can have feedback, I would say, but sometimes the chairs change it and the behavior and purpose of your organization changes in the same way. And the argument, for instance, that suppose that the NATO got very corrupted will be used as an intelligence for criminal purpose or paramilitary purpose. And by this, we are always claiming this new procedure as hand-to-hand procedure, because the delivery will be made on hands, on specific hands, with control as who is offering the asset and who is receiving, at least 2 or 3 witnesses, all with records by VHS on embassies. The embassies can be a problem in the same way and a great contributors at the pandemic organization and mobilization of crime as criminal activity from regular areas. And we have 2 pandemic systems as consume, which implies the supply chain, and the health system, which implies the consume of medicines and pills, which brings ourselves to the supply chain one more time. And the items used at the supply chain, considering that is an industrial argument with fake fake organization for creation as piracy and all things, can impact in the same way the pills and medical things that you offer. It means having the piracy of medicine. And how this is related with the design as communication, for instance, as an inference or something that is close to the reality at the covalent thing, which is the relation between the corporative area as bacteria, the public area as virus, and the corruption of two both as parasite, and implies the international corruption scam. This only will be answered by the hands doing the stimulation at this period. We will finish here. Have a nice week.